to kick us off, what's your definition of creativity?
I think creativity has many facets, but there's 2 points that really stood out to me as I studied it. And it's something that's, of course, solves a problem, so it's useful, but it also is something that's beautiful, meaning that there's some kind of transcendence. There's something about it that we really can't, in that moment, it's greater than that moment, in other words. So, for instance, if we solve a simple problem like we have lots of cars in America, so we have to have parking lots, right? But we don't address how they affect pedestrians and how it feels to the people around it. It's not really creative. It's just simply breaking through. So I think it's something that's both beautiful and useful, but not just one or the other.
Well, what's the scientific definition of creativity?
I'm not sure what this exact scientific thing, but generally what academics have said is that it's something that has value, that has some originality to it. So that actually is more of an iteration. One French researcher called it invention as opposed to intention, where it's something where what's around us, we take and we discover from there, like a shipwreck, we go in, dive in and find things that we use that are useful. The same thing is true about creativity as they look at it. It's really not just creating something from nothing. That would be, God is the only entity, I guess, we have in our language to explain that. The rest of us who are creatures, everything we do is an iteration from what we have inside us and around us.
It's interesting. When I was in university, I was doing architecture, and I was living with a close friend who's an accountant. And he came into my study one day, and I was drawing an architectural sketch. And he literally looked at what I was doing, and he said, "I have no idea what you do." And I was looking at his accountancy side of things, and I was like, "Well, I kind of have no idea what you do." But even though we weren't resonating with each other's particular crafts, I believe there's creativity in accounting. It's a language of its own, and there was creativity to what I was doing. But he literally couldn't get his way of thinking around it.
I think that's great. I call that being either a robot or a wizard. There's 2 ways that we start creativity. And one of the researchers I was studying from, she would explain this, that some start like scientists where we have a process. An accountant would be that kind of person. A computer programmer would be that kind of person. And sometimes musicians would be that person. If we're mastering, sometimes it's involved with certain frequencies and things that we have to begin with a process first. The wizard just has the inspiration first and then somehow constructs. It may seem invisible to that wizard type person, but eventually we all get to the point where we're making something, we're iterating something. And that in that activity, that's the creativity that we show. Yes, if you're a dentist or you're an accountant or even computer programmers, so a lot of engineer friends of mine growing up near the San Francisco Bay Area, they call code, they call it elegant code. It's almost like a beautiful thing. Well, it's just ones and zeros. But yet there is a creativity. We just, as human beings, we have so many ways that it's expressed. And I love that that's the truth, because really scientists have proven that we are all wired for creativity, that our brains simply from where our eyes go to the back of the head, unlike any other creature or animal, we are made to create things and solve problems.
So it's probably a misconception that some people are more creative than others.
Yeah, I think that comes from our idea of a right brainer versus a left brainer type person. And the science behind this is that it's really a whole brain thing, where these networks of our brain that are involved with creativity involve both the right and left brain. But it's even deeper than that. Like imagination, for instance, is actually logical. And when one scientist was explaining this, I said, wow, this is incredible. So what do you mean? Well, if say you walk to the edge of a cliff that's really a huge chasm, and your body starts to feel certain things, and you start to be really nervous. Like someone like me, I'm scared of heights. I have a phobia of that. So I'm standing there, but my imagination, it's not real. I'm not falling off, but I'm creating in my head what that scenario looks like, and my body's reacting to it. And so it's very logical that is some probability, even though it's low, if no one pushes me off. But that's the science behind imagination. It's connected to the executive functions, connected to logic, connected to reason. And what we've tried to do is we separate like postmodernism and Enlightenment thinking. Those are two types of thinking that if we were to combine and bridge those things between science and magic, between reason and dreams, between art and innovation, I think that's where the true genius of creativity lies.
It's interesting that you say it's not necessarily dependent on one side of the brain or the other. That's seems like perhaps an old way of thinking, and like you say, also the power of the imagination and the visual and the triggers that can have, especially in terms of imagined fear. It's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, and we are all wired to create. So as you were explaining, the accountant and the architect. So in order to be what they call divergent thinker versus a convergent thinker, and the divergent thinkers, they call it that because it's lesser of the population. Some say as low as 20%. I would fit in that category, which means thoughts come into my head, and I can't put the brake on them sometimes, but they come into my head, and that's a divergent thinker. Cognitive disinhibition is kind of this word they use for that, where our thoughts are coming into us. But the convergent thinker takes these many things that we spiral from one in divergent thinker to many different possibilities. But the convergent thought is like the accountant saying, I have all these numbers and these spreadsheets. I need to find order in them and list them. And we need both of these ways of thinking to create. We need to dream of the idea, and we need to deconstruct the idea and go back to then find out which of those ideas fits us best, sometimes intuitively, and then go back and forth. So science and magic, in a sense, as I call them, or the robot and wizard, we go back and forth, and it's the speed at which we go back and forth that determines how creative we actually are.
No, it's interesting. Just speaking personally, I've been in a number of creative environments, both collaboratively in bands, through film work, through writing, and so on. And I've found a number of parallels between them all, actually, regardless of the crafts. But I think I've found now a nice balance between the structure and the allowing for these moments or play that comes through. But structure is something that's really helped me as a creative, which is almost counterintuitive to the artist that invents something out of nothing.
It is, and I think that's where we expect too much of our creativity, in the sense that it's from nothing. It isn't. Nothing is new under the sun. I think King Solomon was correct with that we really, we create with what is around us. In music, I create with 12 notes, and have a dominant chord perhaps, or I have whatever, a minor chord, whatever it is that I'm using is still within a structure. And I call that a sandbox. In the tech industry, they have a sandbox where they create a place where you can try out code before you put it to the public. Of course, some don't do that enough, as we have discovered, and we have bugs in our software, but that is a sandbox. Also, it's like our canvas size. So if we are creating, it's a limitation that actually helps us to create. It's that inside the boundaries of that sandbox, and oftentimes it goes like this. A businessman, executive, powerful guy in a meeting, I was presenting my talk on creativity, one of them, he said, hey, Rich, I thought that all creatives just don't want any limitations or boundaries. And I said, no, that's not true. It's like telling a painter to paint something, but you're not telling a painter, well, it's a mural, or it's on canvas, or it's a portrait, or it's a landscape, or anything. So we want some freedom, but we want to know what the limitations of that freedom is. And once we learn that, it frees us up. And so that's what I call the sandbox. And learning the boundaries of the sandbox is actually what adept creatives do. It could be a budget is the sandbox. I have this amount of money. a song I have to write, it has to be 3 minutes and 30 seconds to fit this project, this film. So we live in that. In fact, in the religious sense, miracles happen in time and space. There's like a date to it. There's a location to it. So even the most fantastical things in the world and recorded history that we have are limited by time and space. So there's a beauty to that. That's why we need rest. That's why creativity is a human process. It's not something that just is always in a straight line. It can go back and forth because we as people need rest, and we have rhythms more than we have straight lines from A to B.
I heard, from what you're saying, I heard a set designer say that he actually preferred it when he had a lesser budget because of those constraints that you're talking about. Having a very limited constraint as opposed to endless amounts of money to make something, in turn made him push what he could do with minimal resources. So these constraints can be important.
It's just part of it. I have constraints. Being someone who's over 50 now, I have constraints I didn't have before. It's just the fact of life. We have a certain number of laps around the sun that we take in life. And so for us to embrace that is really a powerfully empowering thing, I guess, to be redundant, because it sets us up for being grounded in the moment. And sometimes it's the magic in the moment that we miss.
Absolutely, especially with all the distraction and everything we have around us. How much does fear come into play when it comes to creativity?
Fear is a big thing. The negative emotions are really important to mention in creativity because loss, for instance, the fear of loss, it's not even just loss, but the fear of loss is a big driver for creativity. That's why even if we're in a good relationship, we listen to a breakup song. And when it comes on, there's something powerful about that, or a sad story, because we have this fear of that. And in creating something, we're able to address some very potent emotions that don't really have this simple vocabulary for in language. It has to be done in pictures and in story. And so I think those things drive creativity a lot, like fear, for instance.
It's a driver.
It's definitely a driver.
Having a well-balanced created life has benefited me no end. You'd consider yourself an advocate for creativity, helping people better themselves.
Oh, my goodness, yes. I think I've come to this one definition, whether you call it scientific or metaphysical, whatever. Creativity is what humans do when we thrive. So we have to thrive to be able to create, but we also have to create in order to thrive. And in our world, it's easy to critique, it's easy to tear down, it's easy to hoard, but it's much more difficult to make something. And when humans make something, it's when we're not at war, it's when we have found peace even within ourselves to a point where we can move forward. And so whether it's making a dinner party for friends, or writing a song, or designing a set piece, writing an article, setting up a big party for your friends, whatever it is, those kinds of activities are stopped when all the worst things that happen in the world. But when humanity thrives, we can thrive and we can create. And so, what's happening in Ukraine, the very tragedy of that is what it does is it destroys what people created. War does. In humanity, we haven't learned this. And then it also ends the life in the timeline of people who have yet to create more. So they're not thriving. So that's the opposite of creativity. And when people come in power, despots, they take the creatives, they take the academics, and they take all the creatives and they round them up. And why do they do that? Because when people thrive, it's a danger to those people who don't understand that that's the best of human quality. It doesn't serve those folks. But the average person is served by having the freedom to create for themselves. And when you do it for yourself, for some reason, there's a magic to how it helps others.
Beautifully said. When someone's in survival mode, there just isn't the capacity to have that freedom and time and space to even venture into a creative pursuit. I've tried to give my own son a foundation so that he has that ability to be free to draw or play music, whereas some kids are just surviving.
Yeah, and there's a difference between surviving and then the pain, the subtle pain of boredom, which we reject. So on one hand, yes, we need to take away these worst things that keep us, but we also need to begin to embrace what I call embracing the awkward things, which is having a conversation with someone who's different than I am, which is sitting through waiting at a bus stop without a book or without anything to try to even be in that moment instead of trying to divert myself to some other place. And what scientists have found is when we are bored, we then start to create. So it's not always from this happy, everything's great going in my direction we create from, but it's from this normal pain that we have as people that drives us to create. And normal pain would be, we know people die, we know that there's loss and things in life that's already painful enough. So when we divert from that, we're taking away a thriving as well. When we take away too much from our human condition,
there's almost a friction there, regardless of circumstance. And I've always said, the best kind of British pop music has come out of Northern England because it's rainy all the time, and they literally don't have much to do but get in a garage and just create an album.
Oh yeah, the rain and the tears and there's something really important and cathartic about that. Human life is valuable not only when we have this shiny, happy thing. I know here in America, some people still believe in that. I lived in Southern California. There's this idea, it's all Instagram happy, right? Everything's great. Everything's going for me. When the truth is, it's the struggles that are normal in life that really form us and bring us together. I know, just as a small example, my wife and I were very young when we got married. And I think the only reason it really worked out for us, because it's 30-something years later, is we both lost family members as young people. And so somehow, with all the other things, because she was a beautiful redhead and I was interested in her, there was that part of it. But when we got to know each other, what really drew us together was this common sense of loss. That, not every teenager at 19 had experienced, cancer and loss of children in their family or parents and things like that. And so having that shared experience helped us to forge a bond. And I think, and that's why sometimes good art, when like Northern England music, that's very sad, can help people in a way, because it does that. And there was a study where people were journaling all their traumas, and these were cancer patients. And when they journal about their traumas, the language started out with me and, of course, your pain. But as they continued, it turned into we, the language of their journaling. But beyond that, the proof was in that activity of creating and journaling their pain, they actually were healed. They had improvements physically that were definable in a scientific manner. And so to create actually helps us to thrive, as I was saying, in that way. But if we don't embrace those things that are difficult, which, it's a struggle for any of us, me especially, to want to go there. But when we go there, when we live in that, that's what the artist offers the world, is that we can all do that with what we create, no matter what it is. We can find that place of reflecting our experience in what we make, not just solving a simple problem.
It's very special that you guys had that bond early on, and that shared sense of loss. The notion of the tortured artist, I think it's a little bit flawed. It's not necessarily the best place to create art from.
No, that's where thriving is important. And there's a certain threshold where, if you don't know where a meal's coming from, that's different than when you don't know if the audition went well yet or whatever. There's a difference between those two kinds of tensions in life. If you don't have the food, that other one is even more traumatic. So yeah, we have to also, the tortured artist or the maestro. There's a lot of tropes that just don't really fit what good artists are actually. Good artists are people who actually serve their audience. Someone like Bruce Springsteen was a master at what are these people going to come back for? What are they going to connect with? Everything he did was to try to tell that story in a way that drew his audience in, and that's what he loved to do. And so, yeah, you might call a person an egomaniac, but that guy's not going to work very long. You know this to be true. Someone who is terrible, just a few of them that might squeak through the cracks, but the average successful creative person is going to be someone who is a good person in how they serve their audience or serve their clients in a human way. And it's not that. It's not the maestro who has to dictate and have everything around them. It's almost the person who we don't recognize, who's behind it all, who makes it great.
Was there a defining moment on your journey where you really narrowed your focus into this area, or was it a gradual thing?
Well, I think it was gradual. I'm a late bloomer. I started off as a musician, went to music school, had a scholarship at 18, music trade school. And that experience, was wonderful. I thought, this is life. This is what I'm going to do. Of course, I was sleeping on couches and all these kinds of things that you do when you're young. And that was all okay. But I also grew up in a very religious environment, which is not necessarily a terrible thing. But in this case, all the things I felt inside, the questions I asked, I wasn't allowed to ask. And I always thought, okay, something's wrong with me then. Okay, I have to just accept that. But as I got older in life and as I created more and as I became more enlightened and awake to life, I really saw there's more to this life than simply being part of a construct that others make for me. That in the freedom of asking questions, which is what artists do, whether it's direct or indirect, is we're just saying, look at this. Hey, why? We don't have an answer for it, but we're pointing our painting or our song or whatever it is towards something for people to look at. And that's something that was in me that I was told that, no, let's not massage that too much. And so it took many years of that. I was a church musician, and there's a lot of strict rules that made it hard for me to, why can't we use, it's only a flat 9 chord. Why is that bad? Too much syncopation in this choral arrangement. What do you mean? All the things that I learned and I didn't understand that what we do as creatives, it has a ripple effect, and it doesn't matter if you're famous or not. It's a wonderful thing about it, and to embrace that. So I went on the journey of figuring out, is something wrong with me? Or these other people I found out that are like me, maybe there's something to this creativity thing. And so as I was teaching workshops to musicians and things like that, I always have questions about the creative process. And I'd say, well, I know a little bit about that, but that's a great question. I have that same question. And so I ended up coming up with a process to kind of help me describe the creative process. And it came out with, I call the dream, the sandbox, and the story, kind of 3 zones that we iterate between, like a triangle. That's where you discover ideas, where you develop ideas, and where you deliver ideas out into the world. And so, but then I wanted to test that over time. So 5 years beyond that, I'm driving Lyft, getting passengers to the Los Angeles airport in the busy city of LA. And I'm trying this idea on all these creatives, these filmmakers and actors and cooks and journeymen and all sorts of people from society. And they all just really connected with this idea. So I went and studied the academic side of it. And in that, I said, well, I might as well put this into a book. I just couldn't stop. And in fact, now I'm starting to research about the sociology of creativity, because there's a creative process that we engage in as people, individuals, or groups. But there's also how society creates and how there's systems and things that we can do or not do, hopefully, to help people create. So the curiosity got started when I was really young, from the pain of something's wrong with me, to having to embrace, well, maybe I'm not perfect. I'm not better than everybody else. That's the opposite, right, of becoming a narcissist. But I have a voice to say. It might be a small voice. And everybody else does too. And so if I create, I'm helping them create. So I want you to create. That means I can create. And that's kind of how it started and is still in process.
Would you say the process of focusing on creativity has in turn fulfilled you creatively.
It has. It's interesting because it really just kind of gave me freedom to say, this is what we all do. So I'm nothing special. So I can do it. So I'm free to just go for that, to kind of dream again. And that's really great. No matter what age you are, if you're like me, over 50, and you're wondering, you can start. You can find all that you have is your creative material. You have a little bit more than somebody younger than you. So it's great. So there's advantages to understanding the creative process, I think, to everyone's personal growth.
Do you have a challenge a specific creative challenge you could recommend to the listeners, but perhaps for somebody who doesn't feel they're creative and is trying to take steps towards being more creative?
Yeah, those people who are the robots who are told they're not creative because they like the rules and they like the systems, you are creative. So one of the practices that creatives can't help do is the practice of curiosity. And so one way you can practice curiosity, and this we used to do on road trips when I was a kid, we would take long road trips. We had the tent stuffed on the top of the vehicle, and our family of 7 would get in a vehicle and we'd go up the coast of west coast of the United States and camp. And we would look for, because we didn't have iPhones or iPads back then, our Game Boys, we would look for a certain color car, like an orange car, for instance. How many orange cars or vehicles can we see? And what happens is once you see one orange car, you'll start to see another, and then another, and another. And what scientists have said, that's how you grow your curiosity, is you begin to look for something that may be rare to you, that you want to find. And so in a creative setting, that could be, I'm going to listen to all the pop music to find some inspiration for a new song. And so I'm going to listen to music that I hate. I'm going to try to be curious. I'm going to see, can I try a new meal, a new restaurant? I like routines, but one of the ways to help your creativity is to open your mind. And one way to open your mind is to find some habit or rhythm or practice of curiosity.
Being willing to, I always describe it as like throw a big pile of mud down and then be able to shape it. But just throwing that initial mess down can be almost crippling for some people to even get started.
It is, because we look at things in simple timelines. This is where we have time and space we're constrained in, but we also have what the Greeks call kairos time and chronos time. And so chronos time is just like the clock. And so we have timelines on things. If something isn't done by a certain time, or I'm by this age haven't done this, or someone and we miss whatever that is, that feels like a failure. Kairos time is saying that things aren't measured that way. They're measured in the moments and in the enormity of them. So a failure sometimes, not all the time, can simply be the fact that we put this timeline on something that shouldn't have been there. But embracing the fact that we can transcend that we can say, an older person like me can still create. I can still sing even, I actually sing better than I've ever sung before. I'm not gigging as much, but there's the chronology has crippled us significantly when it comes to what we look. It's looking for quantity, not quality. And so life is about quality. It's about those special, important moments. And so failure can become, in Kairos time, something empowering if we can allow ourselves the time to reflect on it and to see, is this an enormous thing or is it not? It could be that we walk over that pile of mud and just keep going, or we need to sift through that because there's something we missed. But because if we're stuck on the simple fact that we had to have this big blob in front of us that we created, that's a mess. And that the fact that it's a mess, we miss the magic in it. I call it mining for inspiration. We need to sometimes dig to find the things that really will matter in life. And we need to give ourselves the permission to do that. And yes, it could be in a second we walk away, or it could be we're going to take some time to reflect. And right or wrong, I don't know. But if we're constrained only to this timeline wasn't met, just as an example, and that can be true with other goals that are qualitative type goals or quantitative type goals. What's the quality? What's the value I have? Well, this project didn't really sell well, but it really meant a lot to me. I learned so much from this project. So yes, it was a commercial failure, but it wasn't me failing. I, as a person, my identity is not failure. I am still living life. I'm breathing. I'm creating. I'm thriving. I got to create something. Sure, not everybody bought it, but and if we create that way, the process becomes more of a goal than the simple artificial goal that we have set. Now, it's good to have those so we have a benchmark to kind of like work towards. There's the shore. We got to swim to it. But we need to understand we got to have the energy to keep swimming to shore, to keep enjoying the moment, to see the sun, to see the waves, to feel the water, to be present in life.
Presence is massive. It's a big one.
It is. And creativity is all about that.
With so many distractions, finding that space and pushing back against the constraints you've just mentioned that we have made ourselves or imposed upon things, and finding joy in the simple process regardless of outcome.
Yeah, in the end, I call joy the rocket fuel for creativity. And joy is found not in happy moments all the time. It's found in joy, in just celebrating life. And we have to celebrate life at a wake, and we have to celebrate life at a wedding. And creativity is the same way. We constrain it too much in that sense.
No, it's a nice way to bring it home. Where can people find you?
I have a blog. It's also an audio blog called RK for Rich Kirkpatrick, rkblog.com. And I also wrote a book that if you're interested in this topic called MINDBLOWN, Unlock Your Creative Genius by Bridging Science and Magic. It should be available in most places, Amazon or otherwise. Audiobook, that's my favorite version of it. You can hear my funny voice narrate it. Not a perfect narration, but it is my attempt. But anyway, so you can find me, rkblog.com.
Nice one. Well, what's coming up for you in the near future?
In the near future, I'm doing some speaking engagements, and one of the things I love to do, of course, is speak to creatives. And some of those are small venues, which is a great success for me because I'm the kind of guy, I love to sit around with a cigar or sit at coffee or the pub, whatever it is, to hear and listen. And that's my secret power if I've learned anything from that environment. So I'm doing some of those kind of meetings, bookstores, those kind of small things as well. And I have a group called A Beautiful Liturgy that my daughter and I collaborate on. We write, try to reimagine church music in a way that is not typical, but it's our expression, intergenerational expression. Like, can a dad and a daughter reach grandma and grandchildren? I don't know. It's a music experiment that we'll be working on continuing for this year too.
It's cool to have that with your daughter. I have a similar thing. I do another podcast with my dad, and we review films. But it's actually, our normal, because I'm on the other side of the world, our normal catch up would be what's going on, how's work, this, tick all the boxes. But when we take this time to review films, it's actually much more of a quality time together as father and son. So it's really been a brilliant thing for us to do, being on opposite sides of the world, to try and have that time together.
I love that. And I think this is why creativity and why making a podcast matters, because those connections in our world, we need to celebrate those kinds of things more. We're in dire need of more of that.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been my pleasure very much. Thank you, Dan.